All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for today's session. Welcome to the CTO Con 2023, and we're very happy to have you all join us for another enlightening panel discussion. So today's topic is something that we've all been experiencing in some form or the other, especially in the last 2 years. And it's going to be talking more about a remote first world and how to build and scale a successful remote company. This session is going to be going into a deep conversation, particularly relevant in the today's world landscape, which is how to thrive in a remote first world and how to navigate your way through it, right? Because remote work is becoming increasingly prevalent, especially in the post-pandemic world. And it's essential for companies to understand how to build and scale a successful remote company. When the pandemic hit, all of us, we went remote just like that. And some of us were, especially in countries like Pakistan, we weren't really prepared for something like that, right? And remote work was something of a foreign concept for us. And, we saw a lot of platforms doing very well during this time, Zoom being one of them, right? StreamYard was another one that did very well during this time. People increasingly started using spaces like Teams and, Trello. And these tools were not really used that much before, especially for in this part of the world, right? And now sort of, I feel like it's a level playing field now, right? But what makes that successful remote company is the question today. And I have with me today a very experienced panel of leaders who will provide their insights and expertise on creating a remote work environment that encourages and enables collaboration, productivity, in leading successful remote teams. But before we dive into our discussion, I will have my panelists introduce themselves and speak a little bit more about their role and their company that they're working for. So we'll start with the ladies first. Iba Masood, who is the co-founder and CTO at Tara.AI. Iba.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I am the co-founder and CEO at Tara.AI. And at Tara, we are building a platform for engineering leaders and their teams to basically help engineering teams in particular deliver customer value faster and to become more productive over time. So we use AI and machine learning. And specifically, what we do is that we help engineering teams with their productivity, their velocity, and then also code quality. And so in terms of my background, I've been in developer productivity for over 10 years, just over a decade. I'm actually originally Pakistani. I was born and raised in Dubai. I moved to Silicon Valley about 7 years ago. And I entered Y Combinator. I recently joined the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and basically, it's been an exciting time for us as teams have gone remote because velocity has definitely become a challenge. As teams are basically meeting milestones there as they're shipping, and a lot of that process can be very difficult to basically maneuver and understand, like where are we in the shipping cycle, or why is QA taking so long? So we're helping engineering leaders answer some of those questions, and great to be here.
Thank you, Iba. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm not hearing Aisha. Is anybody else hearing? No. Okay. She's probably asking, Rado, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure.
All right. Yeah. So my name is
Is it better now?
Yep. You are back. No, not. Okay.
Hassan, we're having trouble hearing you too.
Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I guess we can go with the introduction. Rado, how about you?
Yeah. So hi, my name is Radoslav Stankov. Everybody just calls me Rado. I'm the head of engineering of Product Hunt. I'm from Bulgaria, Sofia, Bulgaria. I'm located here now. Product Hunt is the place where people discover new products and what's new in tech. And we have been remote basically from day one, from the company founding in 9 years ago. And right now we are not very large company. We're at 45 people at the moment, but we have been remote basically for the last 9 years.
Fantastic. Okay. I hope I'm back and clear now. So we'll move on to Wayne then.
Hi, I'm Wayne Haber. I'm one of the engineering directors at GitLab. If you're not familiar with GitLab, GitLab allows people to build software faster, from planning to production, bringing teams together, shortening cycle times, reducing costs, strengthening security, and increasing productivity. That's actually one of the teams I'm responsible for, is the team that builds the secure and govern portions of the GitLab product and service. I also have responsibility for growth and for AI and for anti-abuse as well. And looking forward to speaking with the group here, as GitLab is all remote, doesn't have a physical office anywhere, with I don't know the exact number of team members currently, but more than I think more than 1,500 employees. And
Wow.
Been all remote since 2015, when GitLab and in 2015 or earlier is when Sid, the CEO of GitLab, published a remote manifesto, which is actually what attracted me to the company way back when, is among other things, the remote nature of GitLab.
So, Wayne, we'll start with you. And you said, it's been a remote first company since 2015. And like I shared my experience in the beginning, when we went remote and when we started to, this is coincidentally the same time when we were expanding as a team. We started hiring a lot of new people, right? And we felt like for a certain period, there was this certain disconnect with new team members, as opposed to the people that we had already been working with, and they had like a nice sort of sense of community, and they knew each other, they had seen each other, and the new ones, they were a little bit sort of lost, and all they could see was a face behind a screen, right? So when you're building a remote first culture in a company, how do you suppose organizations can sort of foster a sense of community and collaboration among remote team members? And in a company like yours with 1,500 team members, how do you guys manage to do that?
Yeah, and since what GitLab is, we're spread out all over the world. I think my team of approximately 70 are in 18 time zones, and we don't locate teams based on geography. We get the best people for the roles, depending on where they are, and we have teams that span many, many different time zones. So what works really well is a number of things, is asynchronous communication as primary. So not relying on meetings, although we do quite a few meetings, is written communication, and also providing the context so that people can read it and understand the context of what's going on and things, so they have psychological safety, but also so they have that context so they can do their job. And then when we do meetings, we encourage people to leave their video on. Most people do that most of the time, so we can connect as human beings. And also we take really good notes before the meeting, so people who can't make it can put in their questions and comments during the meeting and after. And we also record most meetings with more than 2 people, so that people can not only look at the notes, but also connect and watch the video and the recording to connect at a human level and read the body language, etc. The combination of those things really helps us succeed in an all remote world.
That's fantastic. Iba, Rado, would you like to add something to this? How are you guys managing your work culture?
Yeah, so what everyone said, we kind of do the same, like trying to basically do written first. But something which actually hit us hard during COVID was a lot of our culture was built around two things. One was the retreats we are doing with the company. We try to do 1 or 2 retreats or smaller retreats with smaller teams and just meet in person. And we have found out that when somebody worked together for like 2, 3, 4, 5 months and they meet each other in a retreat, after that, they actually worked a lot better. And for us, retreat is one of the key activities that help us create this team bonding. Just remove people from their everyday life and got them together. The second thing, which in the last couple of years was a big success with us, was internal hackathons. Was okay, now we set up this time where everybody in the company is going to pitch ideas. They're going to gather people to help them on this idea across the whole company. And in this way, we connect people with a common goal across different departments, different teams, people who might not have worked together very much, and trying to make them build something together, which is out of the regular work schedule. Because when you're on the work schedule, the work is a lot more strict, while in the hackathon, it's a lot more brainstorming and a lot more, fun in the terms of in terms. So I think those are like the two things I would like to add next to the async and documentation.
And I think that hackathon also sort of encourages people to work in teams that they have not been a part of before. So that sort of also, I'm sure, encourages and promotes a sense of community amongst people, right? And let them work as a team together. Sorry, Iba, you were going to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to second documentation is number one at Tara, and then I think the other piece of it was it's actually a little bit of a funny story. So we invested in an office in San Jose. Everybody was coming in to the physical space, and then right as COVID hit, we went fully remote, and we had our first launch on Product Hunt. And in fact, one of our first launches was our integration and our sync with GitLab. So basically, we launched on Product Hunt and we went number one. And when we were number one, and we did go number one multiple times, first release, second release as well. And what was really funny was that it was like right before that happened, we went completely and fully remote. And so we shut down our office space. We subleased it to an architecture firm, and it was really interesting because we kind of shifted from that in-office culture to a fully remote environment, and it actually served us really, really well because of what our product does. So our product today has about 12,000 organizations on platform, and 80% of those organizations are fully remote. And engineering teams have gone fully remote as well. So, with like as we got our start, funnily enough, through Product Hunt and then also through our integration with GitLab and Jira, one thing that was interesting was that as we went fully remote, and as we even did our offsites as well, because one thing we did was we started then hiring outside of the US, and basically with the offsites, it became even more important to be able to build culture faster in some ways and be emotionally connected faster. So one thing that we actually did was we facilitated our offsites not so much around content that was about the company, but content about ourselves, just even some of the struggles we've had, the challenges we're having with remote. And I noticed that, we were starting to build some vulnerability as well as a team. And I think that's what's really hard about a fully remote culture, right? Is that there's, water cooler conversations that can happen at an office that are very difficult to emulate in let's say on Slack or via email. And I think, one of the things we worked on really diligently was, yes, there's, that fully remote culture that you can have that can be extremely productive. But we also then started sharing some of our vulnerabilities. We even do things like, talking about like, okay, how are we doing right now before we enter into a meeting? I've seen red, amber, green work well, where it's like, okay, if I'm in red right now, something's happened personally. I'm not able to, be my full self at work. So some of these things have also really helped us develop those bonds that are really crucial. Especially in the early stages of a company.
Absolutely. This sort of brings me to the next question, because all of you, you've gone completely remote, almost completely remote, right? And even for us, we now are going more towards being remote than getting everyone together in a physical office space. And of course, it has its pros. Just even in terms of financial costs, the utilities, we're saving up so much on that. People traveling in, out, fuel saving, all of that. So that adds up. But the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges that I feel like we're facing when we were going completely remote, was how do you draw a line and sort of when does your workday finish, right? And then how to strike that perfect work-life balance. How does that work out for you guys? A lot of people were complaining that, we're on call most of the time. We're responding to emails. In the office, you leave and that's it. And, people respect that, okay, they're out of office and it's fine now, right? But when you're working from home, most of the times, a lot of times managers are like, okay, it's just one email, it's just one text, or they can respond whenever they can. And if you're someone like me, and you have that notification pop up on your phone, you have to check your email, and then you have to respond, right? That's how I am, right? But a lot of people did complain about that. So anyone of you, this is an open question. Anyone can go first. How do you strike the perfect work-life balance?
It depends on the person and the company culture, of course, the combination.
Yeah.
What I'd say that I do, and as leaders, we're also taking an example for our team members as well, is if I see that message on my phone, I'm going to pay attention to it. So I don't have anything work on my phone or my personal devices, except for pager duty. Okay. If I get an escalation, I have to deal with that, of course. Or if somebody really needs me and it's not an escalation, a production escalation, I tell them to text me on my phone, and they occasionally do, but it's very rare. And I draw that line there so that if I'm in my office, I'm working, and if I'm not, I try very hard not to. I try to set that example for my team as well.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'll give a bit more tactical advice. So one thing we are trying to do, because we also have people pretty much on every continent, which have the value of like 24 hours somebody's working, but that's useful for support, not so useful for work-life balance. So what we try to do is we have meeting windows, and we say that this is usually the time periods where we have basically everybody working. And we try to have all those meetings in this period. We force people to set office hours on their calendars and on Slack. So Slack won't notify you if it's not explicitly said so, if somebody messages during work hours. Something that I try to do is, for example, when I write a message to somebody on my team when I wake up and I know that there's now sleeping or their nighttime, I schedule the message. I don't send the message immediately. And I try to have this habit of just making sure you are escalating stuff when it's needed. Like sometimes I would message somebody if there is pager duty type of emergency, but most of the time it's okay, when is the time this team or these people are working, and try to just be conscious of that. One thing is a part of the manager's job is to actually observe behavior like that. One of our managers noticed that, one of the new teammates is 24 hours online, and that's not very healthy. And we talked with him and okay, I'm going to remove your Git access when you're not working. If you continue doing that, I mean, he adjusted that behavior and he's even more productive now than this. And something which, this is more a personal advice to people, is to have a clear separation between personal space and workspace. Yeah. This is something Absolutely. Which I encourage everybody on my team to do. COVID was kind of breaking this, but for example, I work from a co-working space most of the time. I also, for example, have different screens on my phone for work or for later. Now iOS gives you the different home screens, so I can switch those automatically. Just have this clear separation. Some of my teammates even use one browser for work with one profile, another browser for personal browsing when they're at home, so they don't do that. So it's a bit of a personal discipline. When I was younger, something that I used to do is when I finish my workday, even though I work from home, I just put my shoes, went to the store, went back. So I have like this mental door open, close, that my work is done. If you, again, cannot have like a dedicated workspace. So this is some of the personal advice I would want to give.
Absolutely. Iba, would you like to add something?
Yeah, it's interesting. So our product actually measures burnout. And one thing that we noticed in particular was commits happening, and specifically code commits happening on a weekend, happening late nights, and we started to actually we spent about I want to say just over 5 years understanding, monitoring burnout, what causes it, how does it happen, and what are the markers of burnout as well. And so, like through research, it's really interesting research around sprints in particular. And as you're like doing retros on sprints, how can you actually like talk about where were times where each of the individual engineers or team members might have felt like they were really pushing to meet a certain deadline, and what was that causing them from a personal standpoint. So because our product measures that specifically, I think it's also been a part of our culture to be very cognizant about it and what's just happening at a personal level. And so one thing that at least for me I've found from a personal standpoint to be effective is to have like a break in the day, in particular when it comes to like just being mindful of the fact that, okay, I am going to do some physical activity. I am going to take that break, and it's really, really difficult to do that, frankly. In my role, I have to be always on. And so one thing that I've encouraged our managers to do and our team leads is to basically start to monitor when they're emulating my behavior almost. And it feels like, one of the things is, I mean, for me, yes, I do have very long working hours and working days, but I do really take an active effort to take care of my personal health, and especially when it comes to from a physical standpoint. It's not something I used to do, frankly. I mean, I literally used to be hunched over a computer for 16+ hour days, and I've done it for over 10 years. And so I became very mindful of that, and that having those active breaks. I also noticed one thing I just wanted to highlight, which was alluded to earlier in the conversation. I think Rado, you had mentioned it, is people emulate what leaders do. And so
Absolutely,
it's really important to actively model the behavior that you want to see in others. And so I think I'm still working on that. I think it's, I know that I'm guilty of working during a vacation, but I will say this, that like our managers have called me out on some of this at times, where they've been like, hey, you need to be offline. And if you're offline, you need to really be offline, because the team's going to notice and emulate that. And I think, and I really appreciated that they called me out on that.
Absolutely. As engineering leaders, how do you guys ensure that your remote workers, have access to? We're going to talk a little bit more about tools here, and that helps these remote workers do their jobs effectively. So, what are some of the common pitfalls that you would suggest that they avoid? And anyone can take this question, of course. There's a second part to it, but of course, we'll start with this one first.
I think one of the things I want to touch upon is I think loneliness is an important one to talk about. I know that for many of our newer team members, when they first joined, there can be like a situation of people that have already been at a company for some time, and especially like pre-remote, and then when going fully remote, it can be difficult to build like connection. And meaningful connection.
We experienced that, like I mentioned. We went through that also. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's and I think one thing that's really important here is to notice those moments, and to basically like be a buddy for someone that is just feeling that like they're really compartmentalizing in some ways. And so one thing that we've been very active at our company to do is just to do those active check-ins, whether it's at a meeting, whether it's pre-meeting, and to like really understand what's going on for someone. Because I do think that there are some pitfalls to being fully remote. Yes, we're able to hire globally, and we have some amazing team members at the company. Yes, we are able to like, in some cases, either have a healthier work-life balance, or it can even be the opposite. And just as human beings working at a fully remote company. So I think just being actively aware of that and recognizing, hey, I think I might be feeling a little bit alone in this, and maybe it's time for me to talk to my manager or talk to the team, because it can be difficult to be that vulnerable. And again, about modeling behavior, one thing I do at all hands is I've now started sharing, times where I'm feeling like, okay, this is a challenge that's, upcoming for me. And what's the emotional roller coaster there for me that's happening? And just even being succinct in like just one sentence. And the feedback I've gotten is that being able to bring my full self to work is encouraging others to do the same. So I think, it's just a pitfall to kind of just check in on and avoid, which is that whole, just feeling alone versus feeling like we're together in this.
Absolutely. Wayne, would you like to comment?
Sure. Yeah. Some tools I've seen work well that we use in various parts of GitLab is one, to stay connected with others, is we use a Slack bot called do not be a stranger, which people who join that Slack channel, it's optional. They get an automatic meeting scheduled with someone random also in the channel, just to meet and catch up. And I've met so many great people and learned so much. It's not people on the same team, but often it's people on different teams. But I've learned so much about what other parts of the company do, and also gotten to know people personally. The other is we do both synchronous and asynchronous personal catch-ups. So some teams have a social channel in their instant message. Sometimes they're private because people want that, like they're sharing pictures of family and kids and things like that. They'd rather that be private than public inside the company. Sometimes they don't care about that, or just hobbies and things like that. We'll also do quarterly sync ups on social topics and team building, where it'll be synchronous. Would be we'll play various games online in real time for people who are available at the same time. We'll do it in different regions of the world. And we'll also do asynchronous ones, such as, and these I found so much fun, is some teams decided, for example, we're going to video ourselves cooking lunch and then posting it in the channel, or with our latest hobbies. And one person showed their garden, another person showed, which I didn't know that person did gardening, but it was kind of neat to show what they were proud of, their roses and other things. Some showed underwater scuba diving, which they took some videos of that, which was neat. And another, which I had no idea, another showed themselves training attack dogs. This was the most gentle person I'd ever worked with in the world. I did not realize they trained attack dogs as a side business, putting their arm up and and German shepherds grabbing their arm. It was so amazing just to learn about that person and what they did on the side. So a combination of those kinds of tools really help to connect with people.
I'm sure, and I think that that's such a great idea. I think this is something that we should practice in our company also. It sounds fantastic. Rado, what about you? What would you like to add here?
Yeah, so one of the things which was mentioned just before was buddy. Like, this is actually, we have this explicit role during the onboarding. You have a buddy in the company, and this is the person who is going to help you being integrated as a part of the team. And the other thing is, part of our onboarding process, there is key people you need to talk about. And just one-on-one donut style, we also use donut as well. But this is the people who you need to know right now and have that things here. One thing with the connection is, something which is problem with the remote is exactly like that. What are the people's outside of work? Because we see them in work. Like the part where you build trust between people, like the success and the vulnerability and interests, the interest part is the one that's missing. We are still like trying to figure that out. The two areas though, which is like successes, like people having shared successes, or people know what are the things people struggling about, is the other things we can right now provide. Like, and this is actually part of the group that is the team. Like, we used to have like more individual people, and then we started having the team, and it's part of the team manager to kind of facilitate that the people in the team share exactly where they struggle with. Because something where remote hides is where people struggle. Because when I see you in the office and I see that you are like, okay, I have no idea what's happening, you can see it, but you cannot see this at somebody's home, that they are having a hard time. And this is something I put a lot pushing on my managers to do. Is exactly like that. What is your team struggling with? What are you struggling? This is the thing I'm struggling with, like, and trying to just share that nobody is perfect. Everybody has issues, and we are together to solve those issues. Because what happens often with the remote is you just see the commit at the end of the day, and you actually don't know how much effort was put into that. So I find that creates a lot of bond, like just people knowing that other people also are struggling with things, and people sharing successes. Like, we have a kudos channel, high five celebrations, and just to show that people are there. The only thing I don't think we have covered yet is the hobbies. It's very often we find out that two people have very weird hobbies and they have the same hobby. And if you're in the office, you're going to find that out fast.
Rado, so you mentioned something that is really key that I didn't mention, but the thanking people for things, showing gratitude. We try to do that in meetings and also asynchronously. We have a thanks channel where anybody can thank anybody else for anything, and it's so great. I love. It's one of my favorite channels to read on people just appreciating getting help and collaboration with others.
Yeah, like something we have the same channel, and something we do is on the all hands. Our CEO, she's really fast reader, and she's like reading everything to the channel like in 2 minutes, like all the names. And it's always very inspiring, like how many people just mentioned. And this is in front of the whole company, so everybody just know about that.
Absolutely. Radu, my next question is for you in particular, and then Wayne and Iba can obviously contribute. We're talking about challenges, and you did mention alignment on goals and objectives between different team members.
Hey, Aisha, could you start over? We missed the first half of that.
Yeah, I didn't hear the question.
Collaborate on projects and ensure alignment on goals and objectives, especially for teams that are operating and working out of different time zones.
Yeah, so for me, always something around the alignment is I try to split it into two parts: the big picture and the concrete stuff. Most of the team is working on the concrete stuff, and this thing should have a clear goal and a clear deadline. Like, something I have found out that help us from the chaos from remote is having clear deadlines, and people hit them or not. The question is that we have this barometer, what's happening here, and having this rhythm of work. So that's on the smaller scale, like having clear deadlines, goals, and rhythms. And on the alignment on the big stuff, that's actually part more of the whole company leadership to kind of steer the company into the same direction, like align 2-3 teams. Like, for example, marketing team and our data integrity team needs to be kind of aligned. And this is more work on the management to kind of set this up, and trying to be kind of like a salesperson across the team and just talk with the various team members, promote this, and try to recalibrate this every couple of months. Like, that's something what we do every couple of months. We are basically me are like a salesperson. Every time I have one-on-one with somebody on my team or somebody on the other team, I'm trying to very actively sell them on what's our goal for this month, why do we doing that, where we are going, what's happening, and just trying to spread this information. And the way I find out that people understand that is based on the project. When I see the list of projects, if they kind of align to what I want and the team wants to see, that means we are going great. One anti-pattern where we stop doing very early on is the way we design work at Product Hunt is, I call it collaborative single player mode. And the idea there is every engineer, for example, takes a task and they are all full stack. That's for the reason is that they can take a project from beginning to end by themselves. So they don't have zero dependencies. Because one problem with remote is you depending on somebody else. Like you are waiting on the design. Okay, you just use our current design system. You wait, like the database is ready, but we don't have the mobile app. Okay, stub it. And the idea there is we try to remove the blockers so people have the basically they can finish the project by themselves. They have the clear deadline, and from us, we just are ensuring that they work on the right project.
Fantastic. Iba, would you like to add something?
Yeah, the dependencies thing is a real one. Rado, I feel like I feel very heard and seen by you sharing that. It's interesting. We on the engineering side in particular. So we, our engineering leadership is amazing. I am not engineering leadership, but what I have seen work really well with the team is that they've been very mindful of the fact that from a handover perspective, one thing that happens is if someone is in one time zone versus the other, typically, you can't have that. In some cases, you really do need to have the collaborative discussions, specifically when it's a big feature. And so one thing we've been really actively thinking about is, as we put people together around tackling, let's say, a set of bugs that are coming in from customers at 3 a.m. Or it's a particular feature that's being worked on. Really trying to ensure that people have synchronous time zones. So yes, we do a ton of asynchronous communication, but there needs to be some overlap. And the overlap piece is really important because one thing that happens is we're building like a really big feature, and QA is happening, on the Pacific time zone. Yet backend engineering might be happening at let's say the Brazilian time zone or Egyptian time zone. And so we do ensure that there's overlap with Pacific. But the other thing is that one thing I remember getting feedback on from one of our full stack engineers. So majority of our engineering team does reside in California. That being said, for our international team members, one thing they really appreciated was just making sure that there's blocks of time where they can specifically talk to the team. And we do run sprints at Tara. So we run weekly sprints typically. And we start off with the all hands meeting, and then from there we have our sprint goals meeting, and then we do our retro. And basically, one thing we found as the team has grown is that we've split up into squads or pods, and basically within each pod, we just ensure that those time blocks are consistently happening, because handoff can be really, really hard if we're not actively being aware of that.
Absolutely, Wayne.
What I'd add to that, these are great ideas. I've learned a lot from my my co-panel members here today. Is what I'd add is that we're also a big fan of two things: is virtual stand-ups, rather than we don't have the benefit of having time zone overlap with all teams. So we also do virtual stand-ups where people that get reminded by a bot in a Slack channel, for example, what are you working on now? What are you going to work on next? Do you need any help? Are you stuck? And not everybody does it every day, but that really helps so the team knows. And then also what I like to have on my teams is from the managers or senior managers, a roll-up of what's the status of the highest priority things, how are they going? Do you have any demos you can show so we can get early feedback? What do you need help on? So what are the risks and that you need help on? And also talking about gratitude for other teams. So what's going well and just gratitude for others. And that weekly roll up so that myself, for the teams that report to me, but also the stakeholders, we tag the stable counterparts in product management and design and the set team, the quality team, et cetera, so they can know what's going on and ask questions and stay in the loop. And that really helps. It feels like toil sometimes to those putting together those updates of the kind of wasted work effort. However, it really helps with collaboration and communication. So putting time boxing it, not doing really, really polished updates, but just spend a couple minutes doing it, and it really, really helps with collaboration. But don't overdo it, and don't polish it either.
All right. This brings us to my last question. We've reached the end of the discussion, but one quick one before we sign off. We see that remote work has become more prevalent. What trends do you guys see emerging in the remote first space, and how can organizations sort of stay ahead of the curve to build and scale successful remote teams?
So I've been having some recent conversations. One was with a few public company CEOs and private company CEOs. And one thing that's really prevalent is the go forward decision on whether or not to be fully remote, to have a hybrid culture, or to be completely in office. This is something that leaders are really struggling with the decision, especially because, offices, and even in Bay Area, we see this consistently. Offices are still fairly empty. And I think, what I think is really important is to have an active stance around it, and to be fully into whatever active stance you're pursuing. So, I know Sid really well, Wayne, and one thing that I really appreciated about Sid. We went through Y Combinator together, and I think one thing I really appreciated about Sid was that stance of being all in, fully remote from day one, and never changing that stance over time. And so that is something I have been influenced by, and so even as COVID started tapering off, some of the questions we had from the teams and that they were frankly anxiously asking is, are we going to go back to the office? And is this something that there's going to be an active push towards? And so one thing we did was we were very clear from day one is that when we go all in on fully remote, we are going all in on fully remote. And so that is, I think, something that leaders should do. It feels very airy-fairy to not have an active decision on that because, frankly, people are very anxious about this, right? Since they've, it might mean that they have to move back. It might mean that they have to figure out even more around childcare or just some other decisions that come up from this. So I think one thing I'm really proud of is that we went all in. We made the decision very quickly. Pretty much it was day 2 of COVID that we made the decision and we said, that's it. We're not going back to the office. And I think that's what I hope more leaders do is because, it's having that decision and then allowing teams to then basically, have that, because when leaders show that clarity, teams follow. And so I think it's that clarity, and I think that is going to be a challenge over the next, especially the next 6 to 12 months, as leaders come to terms with what they're doing at their companies.
Yeah, I doubt that. I mean, people should make a decision where they want to go, or if they don't make a decision, they should frame, we are making an experiment. This would be the result, and this is how we pick it, because that's people's lives. Like for me, this is very important. Like something which I think would happen and start seeing it in this year, and hopefully next year it will be even stronger. Is a lot of people were forced in the remote during COVID. And that was not the remote work I grew up with. I mean, I'm doing remote for more than 10 years now. And COVID was a very special situation. Hopefully nothing like this would ever happen. But it wasn't the remote work that is the remote work that is. Also, a lot of people still mix remote with work from home. And even a lot of bigger companies, I had these discussions with a couple of people, and I said, you're remote. You just don't know it because your company is distributed. You have 10 offices. People work across those offices. You need this culture. And something with the remote is that it's one of my favorite quotes is like, in the remote, you need 10x the process when you are smaller, but when you are bigger, you just need minus 10x the process. Because when you start a remote company, especially for smaller companies, when you start remote, you need to add all those guards, you need all those minor processes, microprocesses. But honestly, those things scale very well. Like the processes, like a company which product has like 40 people, actually are very similar to the GitLab. Like we read your guides quite often about it. And it's like, oh man, we do that. And you're so bigger than us. And our process won't be that different when we grow up. And I think more leaders would actually realize that it's easier to kind of grow a company with remote culture if you set up the right things in the setup. The other trend which I have seen is we have a lot more remote tools right now. And especially because I'm on Product Hunt, I see all of them, and there is a bit of fatigue right now around like, okay, there's 200 tools. Do I need to use a demo? Do I need to do that? I mean, you don't. They're just useful. Like usually the philosophy is, if you feel the pain, start using something, set it as an experiment, set why I continue using it. If this works, if it doesn't work. And this would make it a bit more easier for people. Like people like clarity, especially for things that are in their lives. And we as leaders, even though we should be honest when we don't know, when we don't have clarity, we should be very honest about it, and we should say, okay, this is our thought process. This is what we're going to try right now. This is an experiment. I'm sorry, I cannot give you a correct decision, or this is my decision. This is what we do. And don't just leave it in the balance. Don't just do something today and tomorrow you say, okay, everybody who is remote now, you buy all the houses. Now come back to the other out of this country and move to another one. That doesn't work.
When I think of the direction that remote is going, I think about remote not only being not having an office, or any offices, but also people being spread out across the world in different time zones and different countries. Not everybody's there yet, and that doesn't work. That is not a good fit for every company. It is for GitLab to be in that, to do that and be in that direction, but that doesn't mean it's a fit for everyone. And I have learned so much. The previous company I was at, we were in primarily 4 different countries in different parts of the world, and GitLab, again, my team is in quite a few countries and time zones spread across the world. And I when filling positions, I can hire in so many different places, and there are so many great engineers around the world for my teams, and that's great. And there still tend to be challenges on a per country basis, not insurmountable challenges, but challenges of what are the laws in that country? What is the employment law of hiring people, onboarding people, offboarding people? What are the cultures and norms in that country? And I still learn new things every day about, like, some countries have laws to say you can't have more than a certain number of employees in a country unless you have a physical office there. And that actually holds us up from hiring more people in that country. Or others, hiring practice in some countries I've noticed in Europe, people tend to give 90 days of notice to their previous employer. Where in the US, that's very, very rare. That's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just different. And knowing those idiosyncrasies and those rules and those customs and norms as you navigate that, I think countries' laws, legislation needs to continue to evolve, because the more places that international companies, both small and large, can hire, the better the more successful those companies are, and the more successful those countries are in hiring great engineers and encouraging people to become engineers, and in other disciplines across the world. Really kind of raises things and creates opportunities for everyone, which is great. There's a lot to get there, but I think as things continue to evolve, it's a great thing.
We're on the right track, I suppose. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise, your insights. It was a great learning experience for me. And I'm sure our audience has picked up a few tricks and tips here and there as well. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Iba and Rado. Thank you very much for joining us. It was an honor and a pleasure to host you all. And that's it from us. Thank you, guys. Thank you to Remote Base for giving us this opportunity to speak today.
Bye bye. Have fun, guys.